Greetings, fellow lords and ladies. We're a little good Game of Thrones Season 4 now continues on with the second episode, The Lion and the Rose. So beginning on Dragonstone. On the beach of Dragonstone, Melisandre presides over a public burning ceremony, setting 3 people chained to stakes ablaze as an offering to the Lord of Light. One of the condemned is Queen Selyse Baratheon's own brother, Axel Florent, executed for his lack of faith in the Lord's power. Watching the proceedings, Sir Davos Seaworth holds his tongue. Those discussed for both the ritual and Melisandre are plain. Melisandre is surprisingly silent through the proceedings. It is Selyse who takes the greatest pleasure in the ritual. Afterwards, Stannis and Selyse eat dinner, with Melisandre as a guest at their table. The royal couple argue over their daughter, Princess Shireen Baratheon. Selyse believes the girl's disfigurement is a punishment from the Lord of Light, but Stannis angrily forbids his wife from trying to physically chastise their daughter for her perceived faults. Selyse switches tactics and suggests that Melisandre speak to Shireen. Stannis doesn't protest, but Melisandre doesn't look particularly interested in the task. Nonetheless, Melisandre does speak with Shireen, who heard of the death of her uncle from her bedroom window, explaining in gentle yet matter-of-fact terms that the faith of the Seven and its holy book are lies. Melisandre insists there are only 2 gods, the Lord of Light and the Great Other, constantly at war. When Shireen asks if there is any truth to the faith's belief in 7 heavens and 7 hells, Melisandre replies, "There is only one hell, the one we live in now." Meanwhile, at the Dreadfort, in the forest surrounding the Dreadfort, the seat of House Bolton, Ramsay still hunts a pesicle for sport, accompanied by Theon Greyjoy, whom Ramsay now addresses by his new name Reek, and Miranda, along with a pack of savage dogs. The girls eventually brought down and torn to pieces by the dogs, much to Reek's horror. Soon after, Roose Bolton arrives at the Dreadfort accompanied by a detachment of his army, including Locke and Roose's new wife, Walda Bolton. Ramsay greets his father and his new stepmother, as well as privately congratulating Locke for his maiming of the Kingslayer. Roose wants to see Ramsay's captive, Theon Greyjoy. Theon is brought to Roose's chambers, where Roose has discussed in Angus' room that Ramsay has tortured and flayed Theon. As Balon Greyjoy's sole surviving male heir, Theon was a valuable hostage. Roose notes that while he has been named Warden in the North, Tywin Lannister will not help him reclaim the North for the Ironborn, and he had intended on trading Theon for Mo Cailin. A situation will place forges on the border between the North and the Riverlands currently held by Greyjoy forces, preventing the main Bolton army from returning north. Ramsay retorts that he had already sent terms and Balon refused him. Roose fears that Ramsay did so without his consent, but Ramsay demonstrates that his actions have made Reek docile and unable to betray them. After ordering Reek to shave him, Ramsay controls him into admitting that Bran and Rickon are still alive. Ramsay reminds his father that the boys are now heirs to House Stark's rule of the North following Robb Stark's death, and earlier the Northerners, who are fears that House Bolton House for his treachery against the Starks, were allied by Bran and Rickon rather than Roose if they learned the boys are alive. Ramsay, knowing how close Theon was to Robb, gleefully taunts him by revealing details of the Red Wedding, particularly relishing the fact that it was Roose who personally murdered Robb. Despite being clearly shaken to know the man he considered a brother instead of the hands of his new masters, Theon doesn't openly react. Roose dispatches Locke with orders to find and kill Bran and Rickon. Reek suggests that Jon Snow might either be sheltering the boys at Castle Black, or at least may know where they have gone, while Ramsay advocates killing Jon as well, given the fact that he has Stark blood could lead him to becoming a threat, says the Northerners are behind him or he will simply seek revenge, although harming Jon would constitute a grave crime since he is part Night's Watch and thus legally untouchable by the Seven Kingdoms. Roose gives Ramsay orders as well, to take Theon and an army to Mo Cailin and reclaim the fortress from the Greyjoys. If he succeeds, Roose will give consideration to legitimizing Ramsay as a member of House Bolton. Anyway, beyond the wall, we follow the viewpoint of a panting figure traveling through a dark, snow-covered forest. It kills a deer. Just as the figure makes this kill, it is revealed that the figure is Summer and that Bran Stark has been working into summer. Bran's work is interrupted by Mira Reed, who says that Bran had been gone for 4 hours. Bran is unhappy about having been snapped out of his working, saying that he was eating. Jojen Reed clarifies that Summer was eating and that Bran cannot gain sustenance from what Summer eats. Jojen and Mira also caution Bran that working so long is dangerous for other reasons. Even though it allows Bran the mobility he lost when he was injured, Bran will become trapped, forgetting his family, his friends, his home, and even himself. And if Bran forgets himself, they all lose everything. The group breaks camp and continues traveling through the forest. They eventually come upon a weirwood tree. Bran has ordered to take him to the tree. Bran touches the tree just over the face carved into it and sees a vision. Excuse me. Several images rush to Bran's mind, including swarms of crows, wights, both human and horses, and the fall that paralyzed him. He also sees the three-eyed raven taking flight in a darkened corridor and later landed on a tree. Bran sees his father sharpening ice and the black cells and being led to his execution. The Red Keep abandoned and covered in snow, and the shadow of a dragon flying over King's Landing. Bran also sees several images of a different weirwood tree located on top of an otherwise barren mountain. During the vision, a growly voice tells Bran to look for me beneath a tree, north. Bran steps out of his vision out of breath, but the matter of factly states, I know where we have to go. Finally, in King's Landing, over a meal, Jaime and Tyrion discuss Jaime's gilded steel hand, and he discloses to Tyrion that he can no longer fight, as those instincts are wrong using his left hand. Jaime is perturbed that people find out that he cannot fight, so Tyrion tells him that he needs to train with his left hand with someone trustworthy in order to better protect the king, as the Lord Commander of the King's Guard. Later, Jaime waits in a courtyard by the sea for his training partner that Tyrion has arranged. Bronn emerges with 2 training swords. Jaime remarks that he hasn't wielded a sparring sword since he was 9. As they commence training, Bronn uses the usual dirty tactics that gets the better of Jaime, teaching him not only to use his offhand, but encouraging him to fight dirtier. Tyrion finds Varys on his way to a breakfast celebration on the day of Joffrey's wedding. Varys divulges that Shae has been spotted and that his sister Cersei has been notified. Varys says that there is nothing he could do to protect Shae any longer in fear of Tywin Lannister, the Hand of the King, or Cersei finding out that he has been lying to them. Tyrion then says that Shae will not leave King's Landing and has sworn that Tywin has threatened to hang the next horde Tyrion is seen with. At the breakfast celebration, Maester Hall gives Joffrey a magnificent golden chalice with 7 facets, one for each of the major houses in the 7 kingdoms, and wishes him and his daughter, Margaery Tyrell, a long and happy marriage. Joffrey graciously accepts. Cersei spots Shae and tells Tywin that she is Tywin's whore, and he commands for her to be sent to the Tower of the Hand before the wedding. Tyrion hears this and looks vexed, but proceeds to approach Joffrey and Podrick Payne. Tyrion's squire presents him with Lives of 4 Kings, a book detailing the reigns of the 4 kings by Grandmaster Caith. Joffrey accepts the gift, but his sincerity seems questionable. A member of the Kingsguard then presents a Valyrian steel sword, and Tywin tells him it is one of 2 swords of its kind in the capital, and Joffrey rushes to wield it. He probably begins to slash at Tyrion's gift despite its rarity, and then asks for suggestions on its name from guests in attendance. He settles on the name Widow's Wail. After the breakfast, Tyrion is visited his chambers by Shae, and he informs her that there is a ship waiting for her bound for Pentos, and that their friendship is at an end. Realizing that Shae able to finally refuse to flee in the face of danger, he concludes the only way to convince her to leave King's Landing and save herself is to brutally reject her. So he tells her, at enormous pain to himself as well to her, that she's only a whore and he cannot love her. Bronn enters and tries to escort her away. She slaps him and runs out, fierce and broken-hearted. When Tyrion later asks if Bronn is gone, When Tyrion later asks Bronn if she is gone, he confirms that she boarded the ship. When Tyrion asks if he saw it sail away, Bronn assures him that no one has been following him while escorting her, that she is gone and no one knows about it except for the 2 of them and Varys. And then advises Tyrion to go and drink until it feels like he did the right thing. Joffrey and Margaery's wedding ceremony takes place in the Great Sept of Baelor, conducted by the High Septon, and they are wed in front of gods and men. At his wedding feast, King Joffrey speaks to the crowd about contemplating history. Out of a large golden lion, 5 dwarves ride out, representing Joffrey, Raylan Baratheon, Stannis Baratheon, Robb Stark, and Balon Greyjoy, each of the 5 kings in the War of the 5 Kings. The dwarves put on performance, jousting, fighting, and making crude sexual acts. Joffrey, his brother Tommen, and Cersei laugh at the performance. The Tyrells, Margaery, Olenna, and Mace and Loras, as well as Varys, Prince Oberyn, Tyrion, and Sansa Stark, make a little effort to hide their disgust. Loras leaves in anger after watching the crude depiction of deceased lover Renly riding a mount resembling Loras, and Sansa looks on in obvious grief when the dwarf playing her brother Robb is killed after having the wolf's head knocked off. Joffrey expresses his delight with the play and prepares to give the champion dwarf a purse, but then mockingly suggests that Tyrion fight him as well. Tyrion cleverly counters this cheat by suggesting that Joffrey should fight instead and show the same bravery he displayed at the Battle of the Blackwater, cautioning his nephew to be careful as the champion dwarf is clearly mad with lust It would be a tragedy for the king to lose his virtue hours before his wedding night. This draws a few stifled chuckles from their guests. Enraged and humiliated that his uncle outwitted him in front of all his wedding guests, Joffrey petulantly pours wine over Tyrion's head and orders him to serve wine as his cupbearer. Tyrion approaches Joffrey, who then purposely drops the goblet and kicks it under the table. Sansa hands the goblet to Tyrion, and he fills it with wine and hands it back to Joffrey. The king demands that Tyrion kneel before him, but Tyrion refuses. Margaery interrupts the tense moment and says that it's time to cut the pigeon pie. Joffrey hands the goblet to Margaery, and then places it at the edge of the table near her grandmother Olenna. Joffrey draws his new sword, cuts the pie, and several white doves fly out. Sansa and Tyrion attempt to leave the feast, while Margaery serves Joffrey a piece of pie. Joffrey commands Tyrion to serve him wine to wash down the pie. Tyrion hands the goblet to Joffrey, and he quickly drinks all of it. Joffrey tries to speak, but begins coughing. He grabs his throat, and Margaery and Olenna exclaim that he's choking and needs help. Joffrey collapses face down and begins vomiting and convulsing, and is visibly in excruciating pain. Jaime and Cersei rush in and turn Joffrey over on his back. Dunstan Howard suddenly perches Sansa from behind and quietly says she must come with them quickly, and she does. Joffrey points an accusatory finger in Tyrion's direction, and as he examines the wine goblet, though it's now made clear if Joffrey is accusing Tyrion or merely the wine. Joffrey's eyes turn red, blood runs from his nose, he stops convulsing, and dies. Cersei sobs with grief and orders the Kingsguard to seize Tyrion for the poisoning of her son. Well, all I can say about that is, well, I'm definitely glad that Joffrey's dead, so yeah. Anyway, so now let's take a look at some notes surrounding this episode. The titles are referenced to the sigils of House Lannister and House Tyrell. In the books, Margaery Tyrell is sometimes referred to as the Little Rose. This echoes the title of Season 1, Episode 5 of The Wolf and the Lion, which referenced the direwolf sigil of House Stark and the lion sigil of House Lannister. This marks the last time that George R.R. Martin served as the primary writer for an episode. Following Season 4, Martin decided not to return to the show as a writer and to work on the last two books in the series, The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring. Previous episodes written by Martin include The Pointy End, Blackwater, and The Bear and the Maiden Fair. Despite appearing in the title sequence, Winterfell, The Wall, and Meereen do not appear in the episode itself. Tom Baratheon was recast starting in Season 4. He has now played Dean Charles Chapman, replacing Callum Wary. Chapman formerly played Martin Lannister in Season 3, though given that Martin is Tommen's first cousin, they will logically have similar appearances. Wary appeared as Tom in Season 1 but had no speaking lines. He returned in Season 2 and actually did have speaking lines with Cersei in 2 short scenes, but afterwards the character did not appear for all of Season 3. George R.R. Martin, who wrote this episode, wanted to set entirely at the royal wedding, just as Blackwater focused entirely on Stannis' assault against King's Landing. Beethoven and Weiss, however, urged that there were other plot lines that couldn't really afford to take an episode off, so the wedding ended up taking up most of the episode, just the Red Wedding took up most but not all of the reigns of Castamere. The first time in the show, it is explicitly mentioned that the Ironborn have captured Moat Cailin. In contrast to the novels, Baelon has never given any specific orders in the show, at least not on screen, to seize it. The only source of information about the capture of that stronghold is in the Season 2 Blu-ray War of the Five Kings feature Greyjoy battle plans. Roose Bolton says that he wanted Theon alive and intact so he could trade him back to his father Balon Greyjoy in return for Moat Cailin, so the main Bolton army can pass through it and return to the north and enforce Bolton rule. He chastises Ramsay for flaying and castrating Theon, making him useless as a political hostage because now Baelon has given him up for dead, given they no longer further the Greyjoy line. Ramsay's own defense is that he did try to negotiate with Baelon, but he is of course lying. Ramsay presents it is to be castrated Theon after he tried to negotiate with Baelon, but refused him. In fact, Roose's entire criticism is that Ramsay castrated him before he tried to negotiate. Indeed, his first message to Baelon was to send him Theon's severed genitals in a box, and the main reason he was about a hostage to begin with was because he was formally capable of furthering Baelon's bloodline. This basic logic seems to have escaped Ramsay, who often tortures or kills defeated enemies without thinking of the repercussions. Roose points out that Tywin named him Warden of the North, but gave him nothing like troops to withdraw the Ironborn. This is consistent with Tywin's plan in the novels. He intends that the Boltons will exhaust themselves in fighting the Greyjoys so that Tyrion, married with Sansa, can claim Winterfell in the aftermath with the male heir. At the beginning of the dinner scene at Dragonstone, the servants who wait on Stannis and Selyse, the servant who waits on Stannis and Selyse is actually staff writer Brian Cogman, making an uncredited cameo. The three musicians whom Joffrey throws coins at to make them leave are the band Sigur Rós, making a cameo appearance. The prop coins that Jack Leeson threw at them were made of rubber, but even so, one of the band members was hurt quite badly. One of them struck him right in the forehead. Ugh. Podrick directly asks Jaime if a super-sighted cannon is made of solid gold, and is told that it's actually gold-plated steel. In the books, Jaime's prosthetic hand is indeed made out of solid gold. One of the reasons it was made of solid gold was because gold is so much heavier than steel, so the muscles of Jaime's right arm would still get sufficient exercise, instead of atrophying from lack of use. Also due to the great weight of solid gold, Jaime discovers that it makes quite an effective bludgeoning weapon. However, steel is still heavy enough for such purposes, while being much tougher than gold, making it also able to defend against blades, for example. In the books, it is mentioned that Joffrey named his new sword Widow's Wail by picking up from several names the crowd suggested, but it does not list what the other names were. In this episode, some alternate names are heard, including Stormbringer, Terminus, and Wolfsbane. Stormbringer is apparently a reference to the sword of the same name wielded by the main character Michael Moorcock's Elric saga, while Terminus is apparently a reference to Gene Wolfe's The Book of the New Sun novel series. Jaime's reason for training with Bronn is because he wants a partner who cannot be trusted to tell anyone that he can no longer defend himself, and he accomplishes this by paying Bronn extra to remain silent. In the books, Jaime chooses to train with Sir Ilyn Payne, whose son was torn out by his roots years ago at the order of the Mad King. Actor Wilco Johnson, who played Sir Ilyn in seasons 1 and 2, developed terminal pancreatic cancer during season 2 and drew from acting, explaining why Sir Ilyn's interaction with Jaime was shifted to Bronn. Bronn tells Jaime, "He tells me you shit gold just like your father." This is the second mentioning of the joke Tywin shits gold in the show, following the pointy end. Bane of Wise have stated that they wanted to have the dwarf actors riding pigs in their mock jousts, just described in the novels, but ultimately could not. Variously, it had been mentioned that there were some animal cruelty concerns, but in the Blu-ray commentary it was stated that they simply couldn't find any actor pigs in Croatia which were large enough to be ridden. It was actually costume designer Michelle Clapton who came with the idea that the dwarf playing Renly in Joffrey's mock joust would be riding a puppet of Loras instead of a puppet horse. She showed her original designs, which did include a stylized mount. They liked them, but said that the dwarf Renly wasn't distinct enough, and asked her to think up something more Renly specific and reflecting what a crass sense of humor Joffrey has. In turn, this costuming decision may have affected the actual script, as it's not clear if Loras was meant to leave it discussed in earlier drafts of the episode. The production crew was so impressed with the costumes Clapton made for the mock dwarf joust, in which Joffrey crassly parodied the rival kings of the war, that they made it a point not to show the cast what they actually looked like beforehand, specifically in order to produce genuine surprise reactions when they saw them for the first time during actual filming. Oberyn Martell mentions Cersei's daughter Marcella Baratheon, and that she's still in Dorne. 2 full years ago, in Season 2, What Is Dead May Never Die, Tyrion established a marriage alliance pact to ensure that House Martell would remain neutral in the war and not join on the side of the Lannisters' enemies. Marcella was sent on a ship to Dorne 3 episodes later in The Old Gods and the New. Marcella is currently betrothed to Oberyn's nephew, but as he more than subtly implies in this episode, she's essentially a political hostage to ensure that Lannisters treat the Martells well. A few lines from the exchange between Cersei Lannister and Ellaria Sand appeared in the Bastards of Westeros beta featurette, which was ultimately covered in the finished episode. In the final version, after Cersei says, "I can't say I've ever met a Sand before," Ellaria Kohler responds, "We are everywhere in Dorne. I have 10,000 brothers and sisters." In the intervening cut lines, appear after Cersei says she's never met Sand before, she continues, "I'm not quite sure what to call you," to which Ellaria retorts, "Ellaria works for everyone else." This is apparently followed by Ellaria's line that Sands, acknowledged bastards, are everywhere in Dorne. These brief lines weren't included in the official deleted scenes in the Season 4 Blu-ray set, though the Bastards of Westeros featurette is included in it, as well as being publicly posted on HBO's YouTube account. During Jaime's warning to Loras that if he marries Cersei, he will soon have him assassinated, he also warns that if he manages to impregnate Cersei, she will kill the child too, long before it draws its first breath. This may be a reference to that in the books. The one time Cersei actually became pregnant by King Robert, she secretly had an abortion rather than have his child. The TV series changed this with comments in season 1 that Cersei actually did have a child with Robert during their first year of marriage, when she believed that their marriage might work out. But he died of a fever soon after birth. This doesn't necessarily preclude the possibility that in TV continuity, Cersei became pregnant by Robert again at a later point, and then secretly had an abortion. The sounds of Joffrey choking at the end of the episode were mostly replaced by mixing different sound effects, because it would have been impossible for the actor to sound like he was choking unless he was actually choking. While it takes about 30 seconds of screen time for Joffrey to choke to death, the sound effects editing took around 6 to 8 hours. Some minimal sounds were used, as well as a recording of a woman impersonating a choking baby. The last wheezing gasp that escapes from Joffrey as he finally dies was supplied by co-producer Greg Spence. In this vision, Bran sees several images and events that appeared in previous episodes. The white girl turning around to face Will, Bran's fall from the tower in Cersei's lines, his father Eddard Stark being held prisoner in the black cells of the Red Keep, the throne room of the Red Keep with the ceiling collapsed and the Iron Throne covered in snow. Daenerys experienced the same environment when trapped in the House of the Undying. The White Horse as Samuel Tarly sees, the three-eyed raven landing on a tree in another of Bran's visions, the face of the hard tree near the abandoned cabin where Sam and Gilly take refuge, crows swarming as Sam and Gilly flee after Sam kills the White Walker. The dragon which was seen flying over the city could be a premonition of the future destruction of King's Landing. In the Blu-ray commentary, it is stated that the visual style of Bran's visions while he tries to work with a weirwood tree, a quick flashing montage, was directly inspired by the style of the Devil's Tower visions in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. When Joffrey used his new Valyrian steel sword to hack Tyrion's gift of rare book to pieces, an air blower was put within the book prop in order to make the cut papers from the book shoot into the air convincingly. Olenna removes one of the crystals from Sansa's necklace when she fingers it, but Diana Rigg wasn't supposed to rip the piece off herself, as it might break in an unexpected way. The plan was for the production crew to switch out the necklace in the next shot, however they forgot to, and they realized when viewing the footage that the missing necklace crystal, which is a vital plot clue, was still in the final shot. The missing crystal had to be digitally removed in post-production. Joffrey demands that Tyrion bring him his cup of wine. He scoffs and showing up because the pie is dry. Lena Headey and Peter Dinklage thought the line sounded so much like a sex double entendre that they couldn't keep a straight face when they heard it no matter how hard they tried, and kept burst out laughing, causing significant delays in the filming schedule. For the shot in which doves fly on the oversized wedding pie, an air cannon was rigged inside to make a gentle rush of air to encourage the flock of doves to fly. The person who used the air cannon knew it was too powerful, firing the doves so they all flew out in one direction, clumping together instead of the more natural flock in flight they needed for the shot. The scene was then refilmed with the air cannon put on a lower setting. Ironically, Olenna consoles Sansa for Rob's death, commenting, "Killing a man at a wedding? Horrid. What sort of monster would do such a thing?" And a few months later, she performs exactly the same act. Ooh, Olenna, you naughty, naughty woman. So overall, I think this episode is pretty darn good, and yeah, I think we all agree that Joffrey dead is definitely a good thing, because he definitely deserved it for what he did to Sansa in Season 1, so there you go. But anyway, so overall, I give The Lion and the Rose 5 Iron Thrones out of 5. Well, anyway, tune in tomorrow as we take a look at the next episode, Breaker of Chains. So, until then, remember everyone, winter is coming.